So, at what point does toxic gossip become slander and defamation? Now, we have to remember that many things are said knowingly, many things are said maliciously, and that sort of gossip can have a lot of legal repercussions, and this is something that people don't necessarily understand. They do not understand the trouble that they can get into, they do not understand the trouble that others can get into, those for whom this malicious gossip is actually taking place for. And for this purpose, I feel that it's very important to actually understand what exactly is defamation, what are the different elements of defamation like libel and slander. I'd also like to shed some light on some Quranic verses. Of course, I'm not an Islamic scholar, but we all are Muslims, and I think it's important for us to understand this topic both from a legal perspective as well as from an Islamic and morality perspective as well. I'd like to begin with a general definition of defamation. Now, defamation refers to any wrongful act or publication of a false statement that injures a person's reputation. It lowers their self-esteem in the eyes of others or subjects them to ridicule, criticism, or even hatred. And I mean, this is actually the starting point of defamation. How does it begin? It begins with basic slanderous accusations that are made when you're gossiping in a crowd with somebody else, and this is actually how it starts. The two forms of defamation are slander and libel. Now, slander involves false oral statements or representations that harm a person's reputation. So, when we talk about slander, we are talking about verbal statements that are made against another person about their character, about things that they may not even have done in their life, things which are generally untrue. When we talk about libel, we're talking about written statements or visual or documentary statements which are made through various means, which could in this day and age also be made through electronic means. We also have to be mindful of the fact that now, with the use of social media and with technological advancements, a lot more is being said online about individuals or about institutions or whatever. If those statements are untrue, you can cause a lot of harm to that particular individual. So how does toxic gossip actually turn into slander and defamation? There are three basic elements to this. The first is falsehood. When you share information knowingly that it is false or it is misleading, and you're trying to do that deliberately to try and jeopardize that person's reputation. You know they've got a good reputation within the community, and you're trying to splash the mud on them, so to speak. The intent of course requires malicious intent, knowing that you're going to harm somebody's reputation. And then publication, so gossip becomes slander when it's communicated to a third party. Again, this could either be verbal or it could either be written. So let's just briefly look at the legal framework of defamation in Pakistan. There are a number of different statutes, and we begin with the Constitution of Pakistan, in fact, which protects the inviolability of the dignity of man as per Article 14. And then you've got freedom of speech in terms of Article 19, the right to information, and of course it depends on the particular context. We also have the Defamation Ordinance of 2002. This legislation defines defamation and provides both civil and criminal remedies. It recognizes slander, which is oral defamation, and libel, which is written or visual defamation. And under the civil jurisdiction, victims can seek compensatory damages, whilst criminal defamation may even lead to imprisonment and fines. Combined with this is also the Pakistani Penal Code, and Section 499 of the same criminalizes defamation. It states that anybody making false imputations intending to harm another person's reputation is guilty of defamation. Now, the reason why I highlight all of this is because people take gossip, slanderous accusations for granted, and they feel that it's just easy to make these statements online or offline as well, without knowing that there are actually civil and criminal repercussions of the same. When we talk about criminal repercussions, and I've highlighted the Pakistani Penal Code, it's also pertinent to mention that PICA, or Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act of 2016, also highlights defamation as a crime under Section 20, and this is in line with other crimes such as cyber harassment So one should be cognizant of the fact that if you're posting information online which can harm another person's reputation, again, please bear in mind that that has legal repercussions. Again, as I mentioned, I'm no Islamic scholar, but as a Muslim, it's important for us to also bear in mind as to what the Quran says with regards to defaming or ridiculing innocent people. And I quote from Surah Al-Qalam, "And be patient over what they say and avoid them with gracious avoidance." So the whole point of this is that patience and graceful avoidance are recommended when faced with harmful speech. I also quote from Surah Al-Hujurat, "O you who have believed, let not a people ridicule another people. Perhaps they may be better than them." And this verse encourages kindness and it discourages ridicule. Now these are only 2 verses from the Quran, but if you look at the entirety of the holy book, obviously the main gist is that do not backbite against other people, do not spy against other people, do not expose other people's weaknesses or other people's flaws, do not go and harm other people. That is the whole point of our religion, that is the whole point of morality, and that is in fact the whole point of a legal framework within a given country. So that is something that we must strongly abide by. Obviously, as a lawyer, it's important for me to also illustrate points in terms of case laws. And everybody knows how passionate I am about Victorian English cases. And in fact, whilst I'm talking about defamation, I'd also like to say that my 5th book, which will most likely be coming out by the end of this year or next year, God willing, is also a Victorian legal thriller. And unlike my previous book, which had a murder trial, the trial at heart in this book is to do with defamation and slander, which is why I'm going to talk about a case from 1896. And that case was to do with a lady called Lady Scott and Earl Russell. Now I'm just briefly going to describe the facts of the case and what exactly happened and how did it culminate in slander and defamation. So a marriage took place in 1890 when John Francis Stanley, who was the 2nd Earl Russell in England, married a woman called Mabel Edith Scott. But their union quickly disintegrated, conflict took place, and they separated after only 3 months of marriage. Now, despite a brief reconciliation, they never lived together again. Now, Lady Russell, the wife, accused her husband of engaging in homosexual activities, both privately and publicly. Now, you have to remember that in the Victorian era, certain sort of allegations, whether they were to do with adultery or to do with homosexuality, they were taken very seriously, and it was a very sensitive topic. And obviously, the person who you were making these allegations against could get into serious trouble, and we've seen that in the Oscar Wilde trial, how he was sentenced to imprisonment. And people could take advantage of such accusations as well in order to harm a person's good reputation. So these allegations, when made against Lord Russell, attracted significant attention, especially considering the societal anxiety surrounding masculinity, gender roles, and also the topics of adultery or homosexuality during that particular era. What happened as a result? Now, Lord Russell had to protect his good name, so what did he do in turn? Obviously, there was a libel case that followed. Now, Lady Tina Scott, who was the mother of the woman who Lord Russell was married to, so his mother-in-law, was arrested, and she was charged with criminal libel against the plaintiff. She allegedly had orchestrated the printing and the distribution of a pamphlet containing libelous material, and the pamphlet was signed by others involved in the case. She faced serious charges related to her accusations against Earl Russell, and then she and 2 others were each sentenced to 8 months imprisonment for libeling Lord Russell. This case simply goes to show that when you accuse somebody of things which may not be untrue, and you're doing that on the basis of a vendetta, you're doing that on the basis of jealousy, you're doing that on the basis of hating somebody, you will get into trouble, not the other person. And I'm just going to actually quote a proverb, just to illustrate my point over here. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and a stone will come back on him who starts it rolling. And I think that makes my point very clear. I'd like to, there's just so much that I can go on and say about defamatory laws and about the moral and legal repercussions. But suffice it to say, we need to look at everything from a humanistic approach. And I say this both to perpetrators and to victims of defamation, and especially to the perpetrators. Consider three aspects to what you're saying. And next time when you say things to another person, consider this. Empathy. When you're talking about a person, think about the repercussions that your words will have on him or her. The next point is, would you like yourself to be treated in that similar manner? If someone else was saying things which were either true or untrue about you in a crowd, which could potentially harm your reputation, which could potentially harm your entire life, is that something that you could live with? And of course, always remember the idea of personal integrity. This is what the Quran teaches. This is what any legal framework, any rules and code of conduct of morality would teach. Uphold kindness, uphold honesty. This is why we're living. Please refrain from using slanderous words. Please refrain from making false accusations against others. Know that it is against the Quran, and know that there could be legal repercussions for what you're doing. Thank you for listening. I'm Sana Pirzada, barrister and human rights defender.